Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC TV. As always, we have a fabulous show for you today, and we really do. This one's a little bit different than some of the previous DABCC TV episodes. This is almost like a webinar in some ways. We have a couple different vendors with us. We have Citrix and AppSense. They're going to talk all about personalization and XenDesktop and how all this stuff fits together. I'm really quite excited about watching it myself. So with no further ado, let's just dive directly into it. So for the first part of this presentation, or this video, I have Derek Cheung with us, who is the Senior Product Marketing Manager over at Citrix. So I'm just going to turn it over to him and let him tell us about what he's going to tell us about. So Derek, all yours.
Great, thanks, Doug. I'd like to cover three things today. One, I'd like to talk about what we believe is the future of desktop computing today, and where it's going to evolve over the next few years, and especially around customer challenges that are occurring today. Number two, I'd like to speak about the solutions that are required and the type of infrastructure that is required to solve the challenges today and provide a strategic infrastructure for what's going to happen in the future. And third, I want to introduce XenDesktop 4, and especially how AppSense can provide additional value on top of XenDesktop 4 around user profiles. So let's jump in. As we look at companies today, what we see are really inflexible and complex images in both the back end as well as at the client device, where the desktop is really tied into the device. Corporate really manages the physical endpoints of end users, and really pushing imaging and deployment as a solution, as the infrastructure to deploy all of these images, which understandably increases allocated cost and really provides inflexible access to endpoint devices. And in the future, we see as more desktops as delivered as a device, as a service. Less management of the endpoint devices, allowing consumers and end users to choose their devices and increase self-service experience. Ultimately, this will decrease the allocated cost required and really switch and make it into a more usage-based cost model. So what are customer challenges today? If you look at any organization, they go through a very complex and inflexible management tool set. From the procurement of an endpoint device to the image, to the imaging, the security, and ultimately monitoring and retiring of those devices. What you should be familiar with is these are really the desktop refresh cycles, right? And ultimately, at the end, they're pushing these out to the end users in a tightly coupled and locally installed manner. So the user is tied directly to a device. This truly increases the complexity and inflexibility of the model. Moves, adds, changes possibly take days. How do you manage applications and operating systems on every device? The only way you can do that is to look at it individually and really ad hoc data recovery and security. It's up to the user in many cases to back up their data, to update their antivirus. And more importantly, inflexibility around virtual workplaces and work styles. When that user is tied to a specific device, you're limited on the number of devices that that individual can work on. And lastly, expensive hardware refresh. If every one of these devices are tied to a user, in order to move updates, and if you look at Win 7 coming up, you really have to look at hardware refreshes. So what do we believe as one of the possible solutions? One, to truly solve this problem, you really have to redefine the desktop. And to us, the desktop is really made up of three elemental components: the operating system, applications, and user profiles. Obviously, the operating system provides the hardware to software base layer. Now, without applications on top of that operating system, most users are really playing solitaire or using Notepad all day. So applications become a important aspect of any desktop. And lastly, user profiles. Without user profiles, that desktop is just anybody else's desktop. User profiles make that desktop yours or any of your users. Now, we believe in order to truly solve this traditional management tools and processes that happens today, you need to separate these three elemental components. Utilize centralized single instance images of these. So creating a desktop OS image, whether it's Windows XP, Windows Vista, or Windows 7. Creating an application workload defined by the types of users. Maybe perhaps you create an application workload for a sales organization or an application workload for finance. And lastly, having a great user profile management capability to handle all of your roaming profiles, to handle heterogeneous profiles across the organization. By creating this single instance management on the back end, you can now provide a virtualized and isolated desktop component to your user. As you look at this graphic, you can see now that the user and client are separated. The user profiles, the apps, and desktops are virtualized. This provides ultimate flexibility. No longer is that user tied to that specific device. They can use any devices, delivered as necessary through a client, and dynamically assembled on demand as the user requires it. So, rather than lugging around their desktop or their laptop, they can now move to different devices, whether it's an internet kiosk, to a friend's machine, right? Or buy a new machine and still have access to their applications, the operating system as defined by the corporate environment, and of course their user profile. This allows IT to have one image of applications and desktops, one password and identity to manage, one instance of data centralized back in the data center for high security, and lastly, one user experience upon anywhere or any device. That truly is the power of one. And as you look, moving desktops and apps as a service, you can now provide IT flexibility and end user flexibility. In the past, those two never really looked, never saw eye to eye. If corporate wanted to mandate a certain usage, it was inflexible to the user. If users required flexibility, it was inflexible for IT to manage. By delivering desktops and apps as a service, you now have the ability for something that's simple, fast, and easy. Whether you're opening a branch office, starting an offshore project, onboarding a new employee, adding, deleting, and updating apps, or adding, deleting, and updating operating systems, applying security patches. All of these become significantly easier as you roll this out. As part of this infrastructure, we've introduced XenDesktop 4, a desktop virtualization solution with 5 key requirements that we believe is extremely important to any successful desktop virtualization solution. 1, any device, anytime, anywhere. The ability to provide flexibility for both IT and end users. 2, HCX user experience. Without a high-definition user experience or a user experience that a user is familiar with, no matter what desktop virtualization solution you use, will fail. You must provide a user experience that is at least comparable, if not better, to what a user is accustomed to from their local PC. 3, FlexCast delivery technology. We understand that organizations do not have the same workers across the board. You will have different workers working on different types of applications as well as different work methods. You must have one single solution that can address all of that. One single solution that provides a delivery technology that can work across all of those. and we'll talk a little bit more about that. On-demand applications. As we spoke about earlier, without applications, no matter the desktop virtualization solution you deliver, you're only providing an operating system. You need a single solution that can provide application virtualization and application delivery as needed by your users. And lastly, open architecture. The ability to leverage existing infrastructure that your company has already invested in. While there may be a lot of other solutions in the market today, very few provide an open architecture as we have with XenDesktop 4. So let's talk about each one very briefly. Any device, anytime, anywhere. With Citrix, we have provided a universal client for IT service delivery. Works on PCs, Macs, laptops, and all major endpoint devices. Provides a simple, fast self-service install that allows IT to deliver the appropriate plugins as necessary to the user. HDX, user experience. We have made considerable strides in our delivery of user experience technologies, which must include rich multimedia, including Flash, real-time collaboration for voice over IP instances, USB plug-and-play, whether it's printers to mice, to iPhone devices, 3D graphics applications, in situations where 3D graphics are extremely important for developers and engineers. Best network performance. User experience should not require considerable bandwidth. It should be optimized to create the best network performance so that you can provide the best user experience to all users across the network. And lastly, branch office optimization. With large enterprises moving to more and more branch office and virtual work styles, you must have a solution that can provide optimization and caching capabilities at those endpoint devices. And XenDesktop 4 delivers that. FlexCast delivery technology, a key feature in XenDesktop 4. As you look, and I mentioned earlier, that every organization will have different users, different types of workers. You cannot use one delivery technology for all of them. For example, VDI in it and of itself is not a solution for all of these workers. Whether it's cost, whether it's user experience, you must understand the types of workers and their daily tasks to determine the delivery technology for them. It is not a one-size-fits-all. With XenDesktop 4 and FlexCast, you now have 5 different ways to deliver virtual desktops or virtual apps to users. Whether it's server-side computing or client-side compute, hosted shared desktops, the ability to host multiple sessions for task-oriented workers, the ones that are repetitive in their daily usage. Hosted VM-based desktops as you move farther and farther away from tactical routine workers. Hosted Blade PC desktops for engineers and manufacturing and designers that require strong hardware and GPU performance. Local stream desktops as you move farther away from the server, the ability to provide and utilize endpoint devices that have the capable processing power. For those that have just gone through a desktop refresh and have bought new PCs for their users, does that mean they cannot use desktop virtualization? Not anymore, because now you have the ability to do desktop streaming and local stream desktops to those endpoints. And of course, virtual apps installed on desktops, the ability to use online and offline apps on existing devices. And lastly, local VM-based desktops. We'll be providing the solution, and there will be more information around XenClient that's looking at an offline-based desktop solution. Now, of course, as you look across all of these user types, you also have multiple user profiles that need to be managed. It's important to understand that to fully utilize and manage a heterogeneous enterprise-type user profile environment, we recommend looking at AppSense, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Second to last, on-demand apps. By XenApp, a product that hopefully a lot of our customers and a lot of you are familiar with, whether it's from MetaFrame to Presentation Server to XenApp 5 today. Application virtualization, delivering application whether it's local or hosted. We have delivered a proven solution for the past 20 years with enterprise scalability, providing granular access control for IT to manage the types of apps, yet still deliver user flexibility with a self-service enterprise app store through a feature with Dazzle. All of these provide a singular solution, XenDesktop 4, that allows IT to provide and manage an extremely flexible and cost-conscious infrastructure. Lastly, on my top 5 features around XenDesktop, open architecture. It's important to deliver a solution that leverages your existing environment. While most solutions are proprietary on their platform, whether it's the hypervisor or endpoint client devices, we've built XenDesktop to work on any hypervisor, on any storage platform, on any device, endpoint device. In addition, for customers that are Microsoft-centric, plug-and-play feature with Microsoft infrastructure, whether it's Hyper-V or SCVMM. All of this provides XenDesktop a truly flexible solution that allows you to be cost-effective by leveraging existing resources. Now, I'd like to spend a few seconds to introduce Gareth, who will talk about a little more of the value add of where AppSense can provide XenDesktop around user profiles. While XenDesktop does provide a user profile solution in and of itself, in situations where there's a heterogeneous enterprise environment with multiple user profile versions or multiple OS versions or multiple desktop delivery models, we recommend AppSense. And I'll let Gareth talk a little bit more about where that fits. Gareth?
All right, thanks for that, Derek, for the positive introduction. So my name's Gareth Kitson. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at AppSense. And today what we're going to talk about is building on top of what Derek was describing there on where AppSense can add significant value to the leading desktop virtualization solution that Citrix are providing in XenDesktop 4. So for those of you out there listening today, many of you will be aware on how AppSense has typically worked with Citrix over the last 10 years to bring value into some of the largest XenApp environments in the world. But for the last couple of years, for the last 3 or 4 years, we've been working heavily in the desktop virtualization space. And from there, we can add significant value in what we consider to be the user environment management section of a desktop. So what we're going to jump into straight away is just quickly looking at what is user environment management, what's this hot topic that everyone seems to be talking about, and then how does it fit with XenDesktop 4. So the first thing what I want to look at here is some of the barriers that and challenges, so building on what Derek was saying, that customers and end users are facing and trying to move away from the existing physical desktop estate, which Derek rightly stated is difficult to manage. It's sporadic and diverse in terms of the devices and the different types of desktops and the locations and where they're running from, which ultimately are a high cost to the organization and not always the best user experience. So what we want to do is move away from this model and move over to something like Citrix XenDesktop, where you can componentize and centralize desktop management and actually split it out into layers and standardized components such as a single image of the OS, a single set of the applications, and then deliver that out to the user base. Now, what we'll see here on the right-hand side is a nice green tick indicating the lowest possible TCO. However, we have a challenge in moving from these personal desktops on the left-hand side of the screen over to this new standardized computing environment. And those challenges come in many, many forms. There's all sorts of things to consider. So, first of all, you need to consider a hypervisor. You're going to go for Citrix Xen Server. You look at Microsoft Hyper-V. You need the connection broker, so XenDesktop, to actually direct the user to the desktop. You need things. Are you going to virtualize the applications and utilize the FlexCast technology of XenApp to deliver applications? And like Derek was rightly talking about as well, you've got the life cycle. You then need to personalize the desktop and configure them. There's all sorts of discussions going on at the minute on the Citrix community sites about the need for user-installed applications. And then, of course, the most important piece for the user to work with alongside their applications is the actual data themselves, the documents and the files and the folders and the data that the users are working with. Now, fortunately out there, there's some great technology that's provided by some of the big boys, so you can use a combination of Microsoft and Citrix technologies, for example, to deliver the virtual environment on which the desktops and the applications will be running in. However, what I have left here is 4 bricks that need to be considered in some of the more complex and diverse and, as Derek says, heterogeneous environments where special consideration needs to be given to user personalization, the actual configuration of the desktop, looking at user-installed applications and roaming user data as well. Because if we look at the right-hand side of the screen, we're still delivering sort of grey standardized desktops. Now, Derek was saying there's profile management inbuilt with Citrix technologies, which is absolutely superb in most environments, in certain environments. However, in some of the more complex scenarios, AppSense is often used to treat and manage the user aspects of the desktop by effectively virtualizing the user in the same way that Citrix can virtualize the operating system from the hardware stack and then pull out the applications from the OS. User environment management is all about virtualizing the user so they're treated as a separate entity from the OS and apps, which enables IT to be more flexible in the way they can deliver different OSs and different apps to the different user types. So if we look at this here, Microsoft and Citrix, great partnership to deliver the OS and then the applications, and then use some sort of user environment management solution to completely separate the user from the desktop and then use dynamic tailored policy to configure each individual desktop from the standard image in accordance with certain business policy based on who the user is or where they're connecting from to create all the correct GPOs, the application shortcuts, the printer settings, drive mappings, etc. And then, of course, apply the user personalization settings not only to the desktop, but also the applications. And more importantly, what we're going to look at now, and this is where we can add some great value on top of XenDesktop, is exporting and migrating those settings between the different OS and application delivery technologies that are part of the FlexCast model. So what we need to look at is why and when to use AppSense in a Citrix deployment. So as Derek was saying, there is inbuilt profile management technology to help personalize Citrix environments. Now, where AppSense sort of add value here is enabling Citrix technology to fit seamlessly into any existing desktop delivery infrastructure by enabling personalization settings to roam between desktop and application delivery mechanisms. And also because of that, we can help to actually further simplify an already simple process to actually speed up and quicken your XenDesktop implementation. And for that reason, this is where AppSense and Citrix work in a great partnership and have some 4,000 joint customers together, all benefiting from a virtualized client computing environment where the user has a seamless experience regardless of how IT choose to best deliver the desktop and the application set. So if we break that out, yes, Citrix are delivering a componentized model, which, as we know, is the most cost-effective way to deliver a desktop. And as part of that, a profile is used to personalize the user's desktop from the standardized images. And Citrix actually has technology here that can help alleviate some of the problems that people are familiar with when using a roaming profile. So the user profile management technology is great at reducing profile corruption and also helping to speed up and reduce the user logon times. And this is technology that comes with Citrix XenDesktop for Advanced and above, so it's available to most of you out there as end users. However, in more complex environments, you often need something more than profile management. And the reason for that is it's not a problem with the Citrix technology at all. What we're actually looking at is some of the limitations of a roaming profile itself. And so while Citrix is great at addressing the issues of a roaming profile, in certain heterogeneous environments where different profile versions are actually used, then something more is needed. And actually best practice is to sort of eliminate the need for that profile itself and use a separate way of virtualizing the user and delivering the user layer as a separate component of the desktop. And this is where user environment management comes in. And what we're going to look at now is 5 key areas that AppSense and Citrix work together on to provide the best-in-class desktop delivery service. And here we have the 5 bullet points. So, working together, Citrix, XenDesktop, and AppSense enable you to take any existing personalization settings from an existing environment and import them into your new Citrix virtual desktop environment, but more importantly, allow for those settings to follow the user across the organization through the different sites, different locations, different delivery mechanisms, even when they go home or outside of the network and they're using offline devices, whether it's a locally installed application or offline VMs, as Derek discussed, and also helping to configure the desktops, create even a more robust environment by using intelligent self-healing to protect the running desktop session, and like any enterprise solution, provide IT with all the information they require to successfully maintain the user environment as well. And we're just going to touch on those in a little more detail. So what we have here is what many consider to be a complex environment, but for most enterprise organizations, this is a standard architecture. What we'll see here is that we're using Citrix XenDesktop in a componentized way to deliver the OS, the apps, and then injecting AppSense user environment management. And the reason that we've replaced the roaming profiles with a UEM solution here is that we'll see, in the first instance, there's a multitude of desktop operating systems. In this case, we've used XP and Vista, but of course, with the introduction of Windows 7, there'll be a mixture of users having Windows 7 desktops as the migration process occurs. What's important to note here is that there is actually a difference in the roaming profile structure between an XP profile, a version 1 profile, and a Vista or Windows 7 profile, which is classed as a version 2 profile. Now, what this means is the differences are all about where the user personalization settings are actually injected into the registry in the file system. Now, this actually prevents, as the name suggests, a roaming profile from roaming between operating system boundaries. And when the profile can't migrate between the two sessions, the users are unable to use a multitude of desktops depending on who they are and where they're connecting from. And this is where at Citrix recommend the use of AppSense to help in organizations where there's a multitude of client operating systems / profile versions. Because we don't rely on a roaming profile with AppSense technology, we can deliver personalization settings to any OS platform. What we'll also see is a multitude of delivery technologies for both the OS and the applications. So here we've seen streamed, published, locally installed, and offline delivery. So for certain non-Citrix-based delivery technologies, for example, Microsoft AppV or any other application virtualization technology, the whole point of packaging the app and separating it from the OS so it's not actually touching the physical or writing to the physical file and registry stores is that it won't actually be writing those settings to a roaming profile always. And so if your user cannot personalize the app and send those settings to a profile, then again, this is where the profile management technology in Citrix, through no fault of its own, is unable to optimize the profile if nothing's been written to it. And again, this is where AppSense can help come in. And of course, then make sure that by successfully abstracting the user from the OS and the apps, that no matter where the user logs in from, on which site, the profile settings would have followed the user even though the roaming profile may not have. So we can now enable the next part, which is a follow me personality across the enterprise. So no matter which FlexCast delivery solution you're going to go with, whether users on locally hosted VMs or server-side virtual machines, AppSense and Citrix can work together to ensure that the user will always have personalized applications, a personalized desktop session, even when the user goes offline. Furthermore, what we need to look at as well is configuring those standard OS and apps with comprehensive rule conditions and triggers to create and configure and set up the user's desktop. So based on who the user is or the client that they're connecting from or the server that they're connecting to, we can apply different policy actions to map different drives and printer settings, different folder access and security permissions, and enable individual desktops to be customized and tailored for individual users. And this is technology that can be used from a single configuration, so very small upfront configuration can help to replace any complex scripts and logon actions that would typically be associated with the implementation of a new delivery mechanism. So this is how we can enable Citrix XenDesktop to fit seamlessly into an environment in a very, very short space of time. And then, of course, once you've got the environment up and running, we want to protect it from any unauthorized or unpredictable behavior from the user. So by ensuring desktops stay in their gold build, we can help to reduce support calls, which, when combined with the TCO savings that XenDesktop already provides, we can really, really reduce the desktop cost of ownership and really reduce bottom line management costs for a virtual environment. So by protecting certain files, folders, services, processes, registry settings, and automatically self-healing them back to their original state if they're by any way, shape or form modified or changed, we can automatically protect and repair desktops as well. So this is where we can help further reduce the cost of XenDesktop. And then, of course, like any great enterprise solution, you want to be able to have complete visibility into exactly what the users are personalizing. So not only which applications, but being able to then take any remediative action if needs be. So on a per application basis, you can see exactly which application settings have been changed. And whilst this is all happening, taking snapshots of those individual settings for each individual user and their applications and storing them as potential rollback or restore points. So as an administrator, you can actually roll back user profiles on a per application basis to help really, really reduce down profile corruption and also the time to answer support calls as well. So it's providing a superior user experience and simplified management as well for the IT administrator. And so what I'd like to jump into now is a quick demonstration of AppSense and XenDesktop working together, where we can take settings from a XenDesktop session and import them into a XenApp session, and also show how we can configure different desktops depending on who the user is without the need for any complex scripts or policy actions as well.
Okay, thanks, Derek. Thanks, Gareth. Let's move to the demo. Sound good?
Sounds great. So moving forward, we've also got Jon Wallace. He's a lead senior solution consultant within AppSense, and I'll let Jon introduce himself and show exactly where we can fit and add value as a combined XenDesktop and AppSense solution.
All right, cool. Thanks for that, Gareth. Doug, what I'm actually going to do, just while I'm introducing myself here, I'm going to bring up a couple of XenDesktops to do this demonstration with. Basically, what I'm going to do is give you a very quick run-through of some of the key features of the AppSense software, where it pertains with Citrix XenDesktop. The first thing I really kind of want to get across is that we changed the way that a profile, that personalization, is actually delivered to an endpoint. And this really is to bring personalization and profile management and that sort of technology really into the environments of today. The environments of today are very complex. You don't just have one user on one device anymore, as no doubt you guys have discussed. But what you have is you have a user using multiple devices, multiple delivery mechanisms, multiple application delivery mechanisms, and so on. So these environments are very, very complex. So the first thing I kind of want to show you here is what I like to call on-demand personalization, and this is one of the things that AppSense will deliver for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start Microsoft Word on my first XenDesktop here. You can see that I'm actually on this JW3 VDI 002 machine. I've started Microsoft Word. I'm now going to customize Microsoft Word a little bit. So I'm going to make some visual changes here. I'm going to change blue to black, for example. And you know what I'll do? I'll actually get rid of the ribbon as well. So we see no ribbon. So Microsoft Word is very, very different now. Now, traditionally, what I would have to do in order to commit those changes to the network is to log off this desktop. Well, with our software, the personalization is actually managed on demand, on the fly. So all I actually need to do, I'm going to leave that one up, go to my development desktop here. You'll notice the wallpaper and everything's the same. But if I actually start Microsoft Word on this one, and you'll see this is JW3 VDI 005, so it is a different machine, you'll actually see that personalization came with me. Let me just do this again as well. I'm going to go ahead and resize it. I'm going to move it down. So it's actually going to track the window metrics as well. So let me move this down here like this and close that down. Again, I'm going to jump to my first desktop here, and I'm going to start Microsoft Word again. And you'll see that those window metrics came with me as well. The way in which we're doing this really is to manage the application settings at the application level. And this is key to what Gareth was speaking about earlier with the cross-platform personalization. So one of the things that you have is an incompatibility between XP and Vista when it comes to profile management, for example. And the reason being is because the structure of the profile is different and things like that. Because we manage personalization at the application level, we're only storing settings that pertain to the application, and they're the same regardless of the operating system you go on. Where this is actually stored is on our personalization server. I have a connection to our personalization server here. So let me just bring up this machine. So this is our AppSense personalization software that's installed. I'm going to do something called a personalization analysis. This is, in essence, just looking at my server, my personalization server, and this is the user I'm using to demonstrate with. Here you can actually see all of the settings for all of the applications that I've used. So here's Microsoft Word, and you can see I can drill in and see the various registry actions. So the reason I'm showing you this is because what I want to highlight is that we are actually breaking down the applications by the application level. And because we're doing this, we also get some really powerful add-on functionality as well, or functionality that we can do as well. So let me show you this. I'm going to go ahead and jump back to my XenDesktop here, and you'll notice that we've made our application small, black, and we've moved it down to the right-hand side. Let's just assume that the user's broken the application now, and it's a different application, but for the purpose of this, we'll just use Word. The user calls into the help desk, they log a call, they say my application's broken, and what the user does is basically say it was working yesterday. They don't really give any other information. Now, in a virtual environment, this is normally, just go ahead, log off, we're going to go ahead and delete your profile, log back on, and you're back up and running. But the problem is they've lost all the settings at that point. Well, again, real time, what I can actually do as a help desk worker or a system administrator is actually go back into our personalization software and use something called archive. And what archiving allows me to do is to roll back to a just-in-time snapshot. Here you can actually see an archive that I've taken here. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to roll back to this archive. I don't have to ask the user to log off. I simply ask them to start the application again. And there you'll actually see that Microsoft Word is now starting as it was before the user messed it up. So that's some of the key elements of the personalization side. Now, AppSense is more than just profile management and persisting the settings, for example. As you guys have discussed, you've also talking about policy management, and especially policy management that is applied on specific triggers. Policy management today is typically done at log on, log off. And whilst that worked historically, again, coming back to the whole complex environment thing, you need to apply policies in different places. So to give you an example of this, printer management. A doctor in a hospital goes to a ward, treats the patient, wants to type up the report, that's fine. He logs onto his machine and he gets these printers for the proximity where he is. He then gets paged, so he goes off to, let's say, pediatrics or something like that. He sees another patient, and then because he's not shut down his laptop, when he opens it, it's still connected to his existing sessions, and as such, the printers for the previous area he was in are still mapped. Well, with AppSense, what we can actually do is detect that network change. We can detect the network disconnect, reconnect as he passes between different networks. We can detect the session disconnect, reconnect, and we can make changes based on these trigger points. And this is done with our policy engine. So I'm going to go back to our management console here, and I'm actually going to go to the policy side. So this is our policy engine. Let me go ahead and open up the configuration. This is a very, very simple configuration, but I'm going to go ahead and open up the configuration that I'm using for this demonstration. And I've done some simple things just to highlight. So at logon, I've just got a general environment set up. I'm doing some folder redirection. I have a condition here to say, I don't want this to happen if you're an administrator, for example. So if you're not an administrator, let's go ahead and redirect the folders. I've got some lockdown going on, and I'm just using standard policies for here. So I'm hiding specific drives. I'm removing the common programs from the start menu. And then I'm doing some start menu management as well. So again, I'm going to go ahead and create the various shortcuts for the applications. And ultimately, what that's giving me is the type of environment you see here. So the start menu, as you would expect. If I go into my computer, it's going to enumerate my client drives a second. That's why it's taking its time. But here you can actually see I can't see the C drive or the D drive, but I've got my home drive and things like that. And likewise, my various policies are in place as well. So I don't see the all users start menu. Now, what I want to do, though, is I want to show you some of the trigger points that are being used here as well. So, again, I've got an example of a trigger point that I'm using. One of the trigger points that AppSense gives you is this process start trigger point. So to give you an example, I put a process start trigger point on the process of Microsoft Word. And what I'm actually doing is when Microsoft Word is being used, I actually need a T drive. And this T drive is going to off to my domain controller and a share that I have for this Microsoft Word template. And then when the process actually stops, it's actually coming and unmapping that drive, unmapping the T drive. So let me show you this actually in operation. So let me just show you my computer. You'll see that when this grabs my drives here. So I have drive H, which is my home, and then I have U and V. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start Microsoft Word. And you should have seen it there, actually. Now that I've started Microsoft Word, and we'll just give Microsoft Word a second to load. If I bring up my computer, you'll see that it actually mapped on demand the T drive, and it's recognized that Microsoft Word is loaded. Therefore, you're going to go ahead and you're going to need this T drive to be mapped. And likewise, if I actually close Microsoft Word, what it'll actually do is remove that mapping because that T drive is no longer removed. And again, this is on demand. This is not done at log on, log off, or that type of thing. I just want to quickly run down some of the additional trigger points here. So like I was saying about the doctor example before, network disconnect, reconnect, session disconnect, reconnect, session locked, unlocked. There's an array of trigger points that you can now apply what we call policy or user automation, that type of thing. There's now an array of trigger points where you can apply these various actions. And the actions are equally as granular as well. So you can do everything from setting registry keys, mapping printers, setting policy, and so on. And then using all of those actions, you can apply different OU membership checks, usernames, whether a member is a certain group, computer IP address, and so on. So if I come to session, for example, I can have a look at the client IP address, and that's going to detect the actual thing client. So the machine that's connecting to the session is going to detect its IP address. And that's going to allow me to do all the fancy stuff like proximity-based printing, proximity-based drive, and resource mapping, and so on. So again, I just wanted to give you a nice quick demonstration, show you some of the key features, show you some of the fundamentals of the software. More than happy to do demonstrations with people in more depth, one-on-one, if so required.
Well, that sounds great. So thank you so much, Jon, for the demo. It always amazes me to see what you guys are doing. I love the fact that how you show that the maps to drive and unmaps. I mean, it's just the way it should work. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, today, again, it's just the environments are getting more complex, and as environments get more complex, so do the solutions that have to manage them, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, well, that's sort of my point. Is that the environments are complex, and these applications today have all these requirements, and so like you showed, I mean, it's something as simple as just a drive mapping. Well, if that's not there, that requires a help desk call. The user's not working. You probably have to send someone out to a machine, or you're using go to assist, or what have you, right? Some method to remote control that, and there's a big process that has to occur to solve that problem, where it should just be part of the application, right? When the application launches, it should do all that. And I know people are, Doug, you can do that with scripts and blah, 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 blah. But I don't want all that. I just wanted one solution that does everything for me. Gee, that sounds like utopia, right? But you know what I mean. And that's my point, is that every time I look at EM, what AppSense is doing, it's pretty verbose and very cool. So kudos. Okie dokie. So let's, Gareth, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, not really. I mean, just further to what Jon was demonstrating there, obviously this is documented as well and is available on both AppSense.com and on many of the Citrix community pages. AppSense and Citrix have been working closely together to create a lot of co-branded documentation, so that can be downloaded from some of the XenDesktop pages as well. So anything that's required, people can get in touch, either info@appsense.com or, of course, speak to your Citrix rep, and together we can help design some sort of joint solution for what Jon's just been showing, some of the more complex and enterprise-scale environments.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. And definitely for more info, visit appsense.com. That's www.appsense.com. So, guys, thank you again for taking the time to help us put together this webinar. Thank you.
Excellent. And thanks, Doug, for hosting it and bringing it all together.
Thank you. Okay, so as always, I want to thank each and every one of you guys out there for listening and watching this video /webinar/podcast. And